Now, what basically, why we are looking at technology for assessment? Because technology has a lot of benefits, despite the challenges. Yes, sometimes people will say, students don't know how to use the technology is slow, this and that. But it has more benefits, to be honest with you, than disadvantages. And some of the benefits is that it allows you to do a lot of ongoing assessment. As an example, if you wanted to do a diagnostic assessment, or you wanted to use some small online quizzes, somebody will come and say, I have 70 students, and I have, I don't have time. I have 5 courses I teach. I don't have time to actually design a small quiz every time. Now, the beauty of it is that most of your publishers have banks of questions that can be linked to Blackboard. It takes you 1 minute to design an assessment. You can have multiple questions, different questions to different students. It pops up on the system of the student. You time it so that they cannot cheat or something, and then it's corrected automatically. All you get is a report back. So you're not using maybe this as a grading, but you're using it as to tell you whether the students have grasped the learning. It saves you time. It also helps you to do some assessments that you were not being able to do. Like, for instance, one thing that happens is when I go and I see a course specification and I see they give 10 or 15% of the grade for participation. And I say, okay, can you tell me, how do you evaluate participation? 15%, allowed. 15% is a big grade. Do you give a grade for participation? Yes. 10? Okay. Okay. On which basis do you give the grades?
I discuss with the students. I ask them the question.
Right.
I want them to ask me the
right.
question. So I note down their names and.
Right. So every time you ask a question, you note. So obviously you can do that, but if you have the 100 students in a class, that would be quite problematic to do. And one thing of doing is when you're using online discussion forums.
Exactly. By new technology.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Yes.
When the student on the list of the student is a laptop or
right. That's why we're going to talk when we come back about discussion forums and blogs and other tools that you can use to actually evaluate in not a subjective way, but in an objective way, the level of contribution and participation. So technology allows you to do that. Technology provides you also good ways to provide feedback. One of the things that we always criticize institutions for is the quality of feedback we give students. We don't give them too much feedback, too brief. And sometimes professors come and say, but I give a lot of verbal feedback, but the accreditors, they want to see the feedback written. I'm giving feedback. So technology allows you today with Blackboard, with the Blackboard assignment tool, you can give audio feedback to your students. So it takes you less time to record 2 minutes than actually to write feedback manually. And you can push it to the student, you can send the general feedback to everyone, or you can send personalized feedback for students. You can use an open source called Udacity, which is a small software you download for free. And you can record it and push it to the student via email, via WhatsApp, via whatever you decide to actually use.
Even the technology does not actually replace the human sensing and the human direct contact. Even me,
Yes.
If I got more than 40 students, teaching them, one course, and we see them regularly once every week. Yeah, by this direct contact and with the office hours,
right.
we know, which is the distinguish the student from the other.
Right. I mean, see, obviously what we're talking here is really about technology, allowing you to, technology is a tool. Don't think about, just think about it on how it will help you do the normal things that you want to do. It helps, so of course, you have plagiarism detection tool like Turnitin or Safe Assign, and these actually help you reduce plagiarism. So basically, one of the things you have to think is that how much content should you actually allow or be able to get students to access outside of the actual class time? There are things that your students might be able to access outside of the classroom. So one thing you might think of when you're actually thinking about your course content is what part of the course content are simple basic definitions and so forth, which I might want students to be able to access outside. Is there any kind of reading, any kind of videos? Again, there are lots of open sources document, there are publishers material, but if you feel that you still want the students to see you and talk with you, you can actually, bless you, you can actually create a podcast of your classes. Have your PowerPoint slides, lecture normally in front of a camera. All what you need is actually a webcam. And you can do your lecture and upload it on Blackboard and ask the students to go through it before they come into the class. The beauty of this is that students learn at different pace. In a normal traditional class, if I come 10 minutes late, I lost 10 minutes of what the instructor has said. But when you're recording it, what's happening is that the students are actually able to look at it once and twice and 3 and 4 times. And this is a bit of the concept of the flipped classroom, which means that instead of trying to do all the content inside the classroom, let's have some of the content let's expose the students to content outside of your classroom. And you don't need sophisticated technology, although I know that you do have a studio here and you do have a lecture capture solution here. But you can use simple things like a webcam and an open source called OpenShot, or inside PowerPoint, the new version of PowerPoint Office has actually a mix option in the menu. And you can create a video of yourself with your slides that you can upload for students to access. So one of the things really to overcome this issue of time is if you're explaining some principles and some strategies, record them, have your PowerPoint slides, have a video camera, upload it on the LMS to students. Ask the student to go through it before they come. When you come in the class, you use the time of the class not to give really this information and content, but to clarify any misconception, any misunderstanding, and to get the student to apply what they have learned on their own into practice. So when you're doing the activities, you can know whether the students really understood the content that you have given them or no. Try as much as possible, to check their understanding. You might come and say, okay, I did a video. I uploaded it for my student. Before they come to the class, I'm going to do an online quiz on Blackboard. You're going to administer an online quiz. There are questions in the bank of questions that you can export from your publisher, or that you might create yourself, or if you're 5-6 teaching the same course, you might actually commonly do. I push a quiz to them so that the students take the quiz before they come to the classroom. So when they come to the classroom, I know that, for instance, the majority of students didn't correctly answer question 6 and 9. So question 6 and 9 in my class time, I need to emphasize more on the concepts related to that. Why? Because they were not able to answer satisfactorily the questions. So using, trying to flip a bit of your classroom, or trying to get the students to do things outside the class is important. And consider it is like homework assignment. It's like time for them. So it's not on the top of what you're doing. It's actually supporting what you're doing in the classroom. The other thing is lecturing. People come and say, I don't want to do active learning because it means I'm going to stop lecturing. That doesn't mean that you stop lecturing. You can still, lecturing is a very important element in our teaching process. The only thing is that the purpose of lecturing, instead of just transmitting the knowledge, our objective has really to be about transferring knowledge that will help build up students' capability and student critical thinking skills. So it means you can still lecture, but instead of doing the lecturing, you might want to do what we call the interactive lecturing. And I'll tell you a bit more about this. Now, when you're doing your PowerPoint slides, I've seen so much time. First thing you ask yourself, if you're using a textbook, is there a publisher? Does the publisher have a material? Your university has agreements with many publishers. If you have the PowerPoint slide, you might as well want to reuse them. And if you don't, there are a lot of MOOCs, massive online open courseware from top universities like MIT and Harvard and Stanford that you can have access to, and you're allowed to use it because they're MOOCs, obviously, they're open courseware. So don't worry so much about the PowerPoint slides, worry more about what the kind of things you can do with your students. If you're doing PowerPoint, one of the things is that we always try to put so much in our slides and so much content in it. The PowerPoint is supposed to be an outline to guide the students. You use a visual graph as needed. But one thing you don't want your students to do is to transform them using PowerPoint to passive students, where there's so much content that actually all they're doing is reading from the PowerPoint, because that is actually diluting the value of the PowerPoint slide. So incorporate with PowerPoint questions, incorporate videos. Do you use videos in your classroom? Yes. You use videos. Short videos are extremely powerful to actually start a discussion. So videos are usually simulate the interest of the student. You know, they hear from somebody else. They hear from another experience. They're a good basis to generate a discussion. You have a 3-minute video, and basically, you know, you let the students go through the video, and actually then you discuss what they have, what are the key points they have learned from the video. Videos are also important when you want to explain complex activities. Like, you know, you want to expose them, for instance, to how to do a surgery, for instance. Obviously, you're not going to bring them in an actual surgery to teach them. You want to actually bring a CEO from a company to actually, you know, talk to your students about a specific concept related to your course. You want to comprehend, you know, you want to improve retention. Remember, you remember 70% of what you see, you hear, and so forth. So basically, when you are integrating videos, you are promoting students' engagements, because you don't put a video and then that's it. You create a discussion about the video. You might come on your LMS on Blackboard and say, all the students before coming to the class, there is a 20 minutes video from TED Talk, and basically everybody has to look at the video before they come in the classroom. When they come in the classroom, you build an activity based on the video. So students have to go through the video. It's not like an old luxury thing. Or you start a discussion on the discussion forum based on what they have seen in a video. So there are things that you actually can save time by doing them outside the class. Now, what's the problem with the traditional 50 minutes lecturing, or 1 hour or 2 hours or whatever? Often this is what happens. Can I be excused? My brain is full. Why? Because basically what happens is that human brain has a limitation to how much it can absorb. And research says that actually our attention span is only of 15, 20 minutes, which means that after 15 and 20 minutes, we switch off. How do we switch on again? We have to do something, and it might be something like a 1-minute activity, pause for 1 minute, or ask the student to do something for 2-3 minutes. It doesn't mean that you have to do 20 minutes lecture, but it has to mean that every time you give some knowledge, you have to break, maybe use questions, discussions, think per share, all different techniques, and then you come and explain another mini lecture. And this is what we call the concept of interactive lecturing. It means that faculty are still lecturing, but every now and then, they actually give a small time for students to reflect and maybe to apply the learning, so they switch off and switch on again. So typically, if you said you had a 50 minutes class, a typical structure of an interactive lecture might be you have a 5 minutes reflection at the beginning, then you actually do 15 minutes of lecture, then you have a small 15 minutes discussion. It might be 3 minutes, it might be 5 minutes. Then you do another small mini lecture, then you have another activity. And this is what we usually call interactive lecturing, that every 15 minutes, it might be just a question you throw, and you wait for people to answer. Or it might be a more complex, structured activity. Now, the key thing is, how do I pick my activity? How do I know what I should be doing in the classroom? When you're thinking about the activity, the main reason I told you about course design was that you have to first look at the learning outcome. What is it that you want the students to be able to do? You want the students to be able to develop communication skills, you have to give activities that develop communication skills. You want students to be able to apply a specific theory in a real-world context, you have to build an activity that helps them to practice that. So what you do in the class is dependent on what you want the students to finish the course being able to do. The second thing that you have to think of are things like prior experience of students. Now, obviously, if you bring a first semester student, there are some techniques that are too complicated for them. So you might want to use simple things and simple basic things. You have to look at the learning styles of students. Students learn in different ways. Sometimes you will see that your students are very active and they like the games, and sometimes you'll see, no, you have more adult learners, they're more on the quieter side. You need to look at your class size, the time you have. If you had a 3 hours lecture, it's different than if you had a 50 minutes lecture. So you have to look at these parameters. The learning environment, how helpful it is. If you want people to use clickers to engage them, and you don't have clickers, or you want them to engage in round tables and you don't have round tables, group discussion, then you have to look into these things. You have to look, then only you think about the technology. Don't start by thinking about the technology. Think about what you want to do. The technology is just a tool, is just a mean to an end. Then you see, okay, there is this tool I might explore to to use them and integrate them. Now, learning styles is just like, I'm sure you know what learning styles, that students learn in different ways. I mean, if you look at the learning styles, there are different classification of learning styles, and some students learn by seeing, some students learn by hearing, which is usually what we call the auditory students. Some students are verbal, they learn by talking and expressing themselves. Some students are physical, so this is more on the physical side of they learn by actually doing something. Some students are logical, they learn by problem solving. Some students are basically social, they can only learn in groups, and we're all different. I have a brother, and my brother and I are completely different. My brother was more of a social learner. He can only work with his friends and colleagues. I was more on the solitary front. I learned more on my own and digging for things. So people are different. Now, obviously, you're not going to do a thorough analysis of your student styles. But when you design your activity, think of having something for everyone. Don't use only writing or only role playing, or use different activities in different instances so you have something for everyone. And as you go your third, fourth class, you will learn your students, you will know your students more. Now, when you're talking about active learning strategies, if you went and Googled active learning strategies, you will have something like 150 strategies for active learning, 300 strategies. At the end of the day, there are diversification of main strategies. There are very well-known strategies to promote active learning, and what you see in this graph is the ones here at the bottom are actually the simplest one, the simple one, the one that are not very complicated, not very time-consuming. So there are small things you could do, like for instance, a 1-minute paper. You just give the students 1-minute paper, about one question. They only have 1 minute, and then you collect it. It allows you to test them. A lot of faculty and professors use a 1-minute paper in the middle of the class. Why? Because they want to make sure that the students are switched on. When this becomes a practice, as a student, I will not fall asleep because I'm going to have a 1-minute paper, and this might be affecting my grade. So you might do 1-minute paper 15 times in the semester, but only grade 3 of them. But you don't tell the students which ones are the 3. But the students will always be switched on because he knows that at any point in time, you're going to ask a question related to what he explained or she explained. So this takes 3 minutes all in all. Maybe 1 minute to distribute, 1 minute to write the answer, 1 minute to collect. I mean, see, at the end of the day, as I said, the time of your class is one of the parameters you will consider for active learning. But active learning doesn't have to happen only inside the class. Active learning can happen, and this is where technology is helping you, because you don't have to restrict the time you interact with your student only inside the classroom. You can use Blackboard all throughout the week until you see your students, but you have to set expectations. So that's why let's move a bit quickly. Now, some of the techniques are more challenging, like jigsaw technique, or for instance, role playing. They require time, they require preparation from faculty. So you cannot say in a 50 minutes class, you're going to really do 15 minutes role play, because it's too much time. By the time you explain the activity and it's going to be challenging. So let's talk about some of the common techniques, the simple one to start with. Classroom discussions are basically very good to retain information. They're very good to provide students to test their knowledge against what you're asking them. So there are things like, the small group you have done, there's like the discussions we're having. Every now and then I ask a question and then I pick 3-4 answers from here, 3-4 answers from there. Again, how much you can really engage depends on how many people you have. If we were 15, 20, definitely we could do much more things than actually if we were 60. But we have to work with what we have. So the same thing when you're in your classroom. You have to plan the activities on the basis of these parameters that you have. But class discussion are a really good way. In fact, there is a technique that is called lecturing by discussion, which means that you only actually ask questions, you encourage students to ask questions to each other. It's a very advanced technique, but it's a technique that would work with maybe master's level students and so forth. So discussions are like the things that we have done. The other technique that you have is the Socratic Method. You know what the Socratic Method is? You know what the Socratic Method? Socratic is direct questions and answer. So like for instance, you see that the student is distracted over there, and you go to him and say, what is the Socratic Method? So it's a direct question and answer to a student. which means why it's active, it's basically you have a big classroom. Obviously, you cannot ask every student a question, but it allows you to keep them active. And when you move across your classroom and so forth, you've seen somebody a bit distracted. You've seen somebody who's not switched on. You've seen somebody maybe checking their phone. And you'll say, X, you know, what do you think about? And it would be something related to a concept that you have explained. This is what we call the Socratic Method. It's questions, answers. And sometimes questions can be among peers and among students. And another very nice technique to use is the buzz group. The buzz group is what you did in the icebreaker activity at the morning. Putting people in small groups, giving them a couple of questions, asking them to discuss and talk about. Obviously, everybody comes with a different experience, so everybody has their own views into it. And then after the activity, you either have a reporting back, or you actually might give them a piece of assignment to do, or you might actually, so they will do the assignment outside of the classroom. So this is, you know, one of the very simple technique. It doesn't have to be 20 minutes. It can be just 3-4 minutes. Put people in groups. And then, for instance, after they put them in group, you ask them to go to the discussion forum and write, for instance, 100 words about the key points that were discussed. So you don't even use the class time. You're using the class time for what? To get them to do it, to basically move around and see who's participating, who's not. But then the outcome of it is coming where? On the discussion forum. So you're continuing the activity, taking it outside of the classroom. Concept maps. Concept maps are very nice tools or techniques to use when you want the students to draw the components. You know, when I ask you the question, what are the key elements that you will consider when you design a course? Typically, usually, I give an activity that says, draw a concept map around the key elements and put key questions that you, and people use flip chart and they draw it and they put all the connections together. Concept maps are very easy to use tools that could be used. All you need is a pen and a flip chart. But if you wanted to use a software, there is a software called iMindMap, which is an open source that students can easily use to draw a concept map. But it's very quick activity. You explain the concept, you ask the students to draw the connection between things using a concept map. And then they can come and present it, or you might use some peer learning. So you say group 1 is going to work on the concept map, group 2, then group 1 and group 2 meet together and discuss their concept maps. So you can mix some of these activities together. So you could give your students 1-minute paper every class, sometimes in the middle, sometimes at the end. You don't need to grade each one of them. You might randomly say, I'll grade 3, 4 just as to see how attentive my students are, and pick maybe the ones from the beginning of the weeks. If you didn't want to grade them, you might use Blackboard if they had a mobile application and ask them to log in into Blackboard and answer one question, and you'll have it come to your system. It might be a multiple choice question you have put on Blackboard. So these are small things. They're not time consuming. They will take, all in all, 3 minutes at most. But they make sure your students know it's coming, and they know eventually this is going to contribute to their grade. So they become attentive. And this is the whole point, is really part of creating the culture.
Sorry